Brothers in Tech is a weekly podcast focused on personal and home technology, helping provide you, our fellow brothers and sisters in tech, with some information, assistance, and recommendations. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Brothers in Tech here on the Mesh.tv podcast network. My name is Alan Jackson. With me to my right on the video screen, if you're watching on video, or audibly, he's on no side, is exactly in the same spot I am, and that is my brother, Brian Jackson.
Hey.
How you doing?
I'm good. Doing good. So, if someone has spatial audio, can they hear from where we're coming from? Does this audio come in at different sides?
I don't think the platform we're recording on does spatial audio.
Okay.
That is a feature request I think we should put in, because I think it would be kind of cool for people to be listening and me be on one side.
Oh, yeah, one of their ears. Yeah.
That would be kind of fun.
I think it would be awesome, actually. I mean, someone can take out your headphone and not have to listen to you and then just listen to me. And I mean, if enjoyment goes up, then we're willing to do whatever it takes, right?
Right. I mean, or if they're just not interested in really learning anything, then that's what they would do, is they would just leave your headphone in, and that would be great. It's just like it's like white noise. It's just meaningless audio going on the whole time we're listening.
Yeah.
So either way, I mean, they could do it whichever way they want.
Oh, man, I've missed talking to you. I really missed it. This is,
It's once a week. We bottle it up. I write down all of the insults I want to throw in throughout the week, and I have to try to go through my list and make sure I hit them all during this hour recording we have.
Yeah, and that's usually why our recordings go a little long, right? Is you've got all the checklists to try to knock off.
If you cut out all of the just us bantering, there might be like 7 or 8 minutes of actual content in the show.
Yeah, this is like golf. This is like golf, right? I mean, 4 hours and you're hitting a ball like for 6 minutes, right? That's pretty much what you're getting with us, right? Actual content for a very short amount of time, but the entertainment value
it's still not pretty.
It's
just still not that high.
Oh yeah, you're right. It's really not very good. It's not.
I think we just got to be honest. It's not good. So this is Brothers in Tech. This is where Brian and I get together and we talk, as you can imagine, technology. We talk a lot of family and home and personal technology, things that people use every day. When we get together, we either have a topic where we discuss some aspect of home family technology that we want to explore a little bit more. Sometimes we have episodes with Brothers in Tech suggestions. Sometimes we talk about, we just started the whole efficiencies, productivity kind of last week, which I thought went really well.
Yep.
But Brian, we're going to take a little bit of a mulligan this week, going back to your golf reference. We don't really have anything too informative to share.
Oh, come on now.
But what we did want to do is kind of follow up on an episode we did maybe a few months ago, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And we talked about the state of the Mac, Apple Macintosh computer. And we went through an episode where we talked about kind of what the different models and so forth were. Well, it just so happened, Brian, that you and I both, unbeknownst to one another, purchased the exact same laptop, MacBook Pro laptop, in the last, 60 days?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay. I think mine was about 45, 60 days ago.
Yeah, yours was you got yours before I did. Now mine was purchased by my company, so therefore I didn't spend it, but I got mine I've had it maybe 3 weeks. Yeah.
Okay.
So still fairly new. Yep.
But it turns out we got the exact same
we did
model. So what we thought we would do is you and I have not actually swapped any notes or feedback on our experiences with our new laptops yet.
Well, of course we haven't, because the listeners hear every time that you and I chat.
That's right.
There's no talking outside of this. So no, we have not shared anything other than what you guys have heard.
Yeah, if you, the listener, have not heard us talk about this, then that means we have not talked about it at all in person or anything else, because this is our only mode of communication every week. So we thought it'd be interesting to kind of maybe go through and kind of talk a little bit about the choices we made on this laptop, our experiences with them so far, and then how it fits into the broader scope of Mac laptops. Because even Brian, even though we did an episode a few months ago on this, I've still had I honestly have had 2 people in the last week approach me asking for recommendations when it comes to a Mac laptop.
Yep.
And
yep.
It is still a question for a lot of people when they're looking to get a new Mac laptop. And that is one of the most popular things that Apple sells on the Mac line are their laptops. So we want to talk through a little bit of that. We're going to talk through our own experiences with our current laptop that we've purchased and why we did, some likes, maybe if there's any dislikes about it, things that we want people to be aware of. Then we can just talk about the bigger picture of Mac laptops and kind of where this fits and who might be the target market for some of the models available right now.
Yep, I think that makes sense.
Sound good to you?
Yep. Yeah, I'm excited to hear your thoughts about the computer and then also kind of that decision process because it isn't cut and dry. I will tell people if you're thinking about looking into it, it's not an easy decision because there are some give and takes, and the give and takes are not necessarily obvious of, oh, I use it for this and this is what I get, and I use it for that, I do a different thing. That's not necessarily the case. So yeah, so I think this is, I don't know if anyone else will get anything out of it, but I'm certainly excited to hear your thoughts on this and, see if it's kind of similar to mine.
Do we really ever do any of this for anybody else?
No, well, that's very true. Very true.
We do this just for our own personal enjoyment. I want to hear you talk about your laptop. You want to hear me talk about mine. So let's just record it.
That's all good.
What happens. All right.
Awesome.
So let's talk about it. So you and I both ended up purchasing the MacBook Pro.
Yep.
And Brian, you got the 14-inch?
Correct. 14-inch.
I did too.
Okay.
I did too. Just as a reminder to everybody, when we're talking about these particular computers, Apple makes basically 3 levels of laptops with 2 branded names. You have the MacBook Air and you have MacBook Pros. On the MacBook Pro level, there's technically, I would say, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but there's really 2 different levels of what they call MacBook Pros. You and I both went with the higher level MacBook Pros, which you could argue are kind of the true MacBook Pros.
Right.
Because they contain a lot of the items in a laptop that a Pro line is meant to have. Now, they make the MacBook Pro in the 14-inch and 16-inch. You and I both went with 14-inch.
Yep.
I'm kind of curious your thought process on that. Why going with the smaller of the 2?
Yep.
Because I know I have my own thoughts on it. But Brian, why ended up going with the 14-inch versus the 16-inch?
Sure. Yeah. If we would start there, I never once considered the 16. So I'm coming from a 13-inch was the last computer that I had, and it was a 13-inch MacBook Pro. I think you and I both may have been in a similar computer there as well, like the 2017 model. So about 4 or 5 years old, and I actually like the form factor. I spend most of my day. So if I'm plugged in at the office, I'm on an external monitor. If I'm at home, I'm on an external monitor, unless I'm traveling to a class. And even then, if I'm in a class, I'm probably presenting to a big screen. So there's very few times where I am just on the laptop. But I do like traveling with it. I do like carrying it around. I like to be able to pull it out at a meeting. Meetings, of course, is the kind of the big piece. If I'm in a meeting, I want to be able to open it. But that usually requires me traveling with it. And I'm oftentimes not necessarily traveling with a big bag to a meeting, to and from campus, that sort of thing. So yeah, for me, it was a no-brainer. I was actually more worried about going to the 14 as opposed to the 13. Just size-wise, because I've gotten so used to the 13-inch that I really enjoy that form factor. So for me, I'm not even sure I looked into the specs of a 16 at all, because I knew there was a price bump, and I knew I really had no interest or need to have a larger screen from what I had. So how about you?
So I went with the 14 as well. Now the 14 for me was a little bit of a scaling down. I actually had used a 15-inch laptop traditionally. Actually, Brian, I was back in the day when they had 17-inch MacBook Pros. That's what I had for a while.
Yeah.
15-inch, I realized 17 was a little too big for me. Spot. Really happy with the 15-inch MacBook Pros that the generation, the size I had before. So when it came to deciding here, I'm in a similar situation to you. I have my home office and I have my office. Both locations I use external monitors. So I very rarely am using my laptop, just the laptop. So my thought process was, well, if I'm using an external monitor, then the size of the screen of the laptop is a little more irrelevant to me. I am traveling less than I used to. I used to travel quite a bit. I don't travel as much now. So not feeling like I'm going to be in a hotel room working and needing a larger laptop screen to work on wasn't quite as important as it was years ago. And when I do travel, I'm getting to the point where I kind of want my travel to be a little lighter with things I take. So having a smaller laptop kind of helps with that. I will say though, the one thing, the 13-inch I'm doing fine, or the 14-inch I'm doing fine with. It is a little bit smaller than what I was used to before. I will say with my eyes in my age, sometimes it's a little more, I find myself a little more constricted on my real estate on the screen than maybe I'd like to be.
Yeah.
But not enough to where I would say I would err in favor of a larger laptop. So I think that's where the question mark comes into, is you're thinking about your own work situation, or where you're doing work on your laptop. If you are going to be 75% or more of the time at a stationary spot that may have capability for an external monitor or other paraphernalia with it, then really having a larger screen just doesn't make as much sense on the laptop. But if you are someone who wants to work exclusively on your laptop, you're not going to be on external monitors, or you are very mobile, meaning you've got a lot of different places where you could be working with this laptop and you're not going to have a monitor at every location, then maybe the 16-inch is a little better for you. My coworker at my office, we both got new ones at the same time. He got the 16-inch because he can't work on anything smaller than 16, really. Yeah. And that's fine. Yeah. I mean, that just works for him. But I'm very happy with the 14-inch size.
Yeah. So, Alan, let me ask you, if the price was the same, would you have gone to 16?
Price is the same?
If the price was the same, if you just said, hey, here's the specs are the same, the only difference is the bigger screen.
Only because I would see it as more of a value.
Okay.
If I was paying the same amount and I could get a little bigger screen, I'd probably find a way to make that comfortable for me. But
for me, I'm the opposite. Like, to me, being able to pack the same performance into a smaller size that allows me to carry it easier, allows me to throw it into a bag easier. It allows me to put it on my lap more comfortably, show it to someone else, that sort of thing. Yeah. So for me, it really was, there was no question. I many years ago, I think I was on a 15-inch laptop and it was fine, but that was also not when you were really putting it on the lap that often. It was still heavy. I weren't carrying the brick around a lot, but for me, it was just a no-brainer. Now with the 16, you do have the ability, I think, to boost up a little bit more, don't you? And some of the other
you can go higher on specs with the 16-inch.
Yeah,
which is
because you got more real estate to work with, right, inside. Yep.
Yeah, but I will go ahead, and this is kind of leading into our next question about specs and choices on that. As tempted as I am, I used to be, Brian, the kind of person where, man, if I'm getting a laptop, I'm getting the best I can
max
get,
it out,
the best processor, the most RAM, whatever. I'm realizing I don't need all that. Yes, I do a lot of video editing, but I am not editing feature films. I am not designing high-end 3D graphics. My work is pro level, but it is more of a, I hate saying lower level, pro level, but it kind of is. I can be okay with moderate specs on a laptop and still find myself very, very happy with the performance.
Yeah, I think it's like, it's consumer level pro work. It's something like that where you're actually, it's like these are programs that I am using for a professional situation, but I'm also doing tasks that consumers can do. It's just I have the skill set to do them better and more effectively. I mean, I think honestly, something like a Photoshop, right, which used to really wear down a computer, and drag it down if you're processing certain things, or Final Cut and some of those. I mean, those are now pretty standard, right? Standard programs that these computers are kind of dialed in to do. And of course, as you said, as the bigger files come about, that's really the issue, right? Isn't it? Kind of rendering files becomes the big issue. It's like, how much can this thing do, and how long is it going to take? So I think that's really the threshold, right? If you've got the ability to do the things you want to do that aren't costing you a ton of time waiting for something to get done, then I think you're going to be okay. So
well, and I think where the 14 to 16 also had a distinction, if I remember correctly. And again, I'm trying to go back through my memory to see how this worked. I know that you have a choice now, which is something we've never had a choice before on a Mac. Well, we have, but not quite as distinguished as this choice has been. In choosing the processor we want in here,
right?
Because there are different levels. The M1 processor, as we've mentioned in a previous episode, is Apple's own internal manufactured processor. The M1, and now they're up to the M2. Yes, this laptop has an M1. It does not have an M2. I think we'll get to that in a little bit when we talk about some of the other models, but don't let that be dissuade you from this, because the M1 compared to the Intel chips that we used to have and some others are worlds better. So I did not go with the Max. I did not go with the super high-end processor. I was very happy with the Pro level getting on that. I did go up to 32 gigs of RAM for me.
Yep, me too.
And just because RAM is my thing. RAM, guys, is what, if you're still not clear on the difference, RAM is allowing you to do multiple things at the same time. It's basically like the short-term memory of your computer, what it's able to do and hold at one time. So if you're somebody who has a lot of programs open all the time, running in the background, if you're going to be rendering a video in the background while you're doing some other work in another program, and you want everything kind of running smooth and nice and clean, that's where RAM comes into play. 32, I've never had 32 gigs of RAM on a machine before, so I've always done 16. This is the time I said, you know what, I have, right now I've got 12 applications open. Final Cut Pro is open almost all the time on my laptop, and I like it to be able to render and run and process and export in the background very easily. So RAM was an important thing for me. So I went to 32. Sounds like you did as well.
I did. Yep. Yeah, 32. I mean, that one was a tricky one because I don't think I needed it at all. But keep in mind, this is one of those things. So RAM and hard drive space is the big decision to make, right? Neither one, you can't update either one a little later on a Mac. Or at least you can't with these devices. You used to be able to in some others. So for RAM, I went ahead and tried to get the higher RAM on this because I knew that, for the next 5 years as I have this machine and some of the use cases start to grow and start to get more, memory hog types of applications, that I figured I might want that. Right. And that's where maybe, Alan, we can kind of, I don't know if, I don't want to take us off track here, but since you mentioned what RAM is, let's also kind of compare that to hard drive space, because those are really the two big decisions, right? Now, of course, you mentioned 3 decisions. You had to decide on the chip. Once you decide the chip, how much RAM and then how much hard drive space. And for me, this is where you and I may differ a little bit. I don't max out hard drive space. I don't necessarily think I need that much hard drive space. I've started to learn that I don't utilize a lot of hard drive space. I try to minimize what's on my machine, but I love well, let's put it this way. On the flip side, I hate having slowing down of my opening of apps and of switching apps and doing things on the app. So I really wanted that to be high. And if I was going to spend the money, it was going to be on that instead of a hard drive, because I can always plug in an external hard drive. I can always save to the cloud, and it's going to be fine. But I can't always increase my my RAM capability. So that to me is more important. And it's funny, I've heard a lot of people on things like phones and all of that, they'll say the exact opposite. They'll say, oh, no, I went after the one that the biggest, storage space, because that's my one opportunity to do it. And for me, I just know, there are ways of limiting what you keep on a phone or on a computer. But getting the processor so that it stays snappy is a totally different thing.
So what hard drive, what SSD storage size you
got? I went with, I think it's 500 gigabytes.
512.
Yeah. So I did the 512.
All right, so that's where you and I differ by one spec, because I did go with the 1 terabyte drive. Kind of wish.
And I could see how you use it. Right.
Kind of wish I'd gone with 2, 2 terabytes, only because if it wasn't for video, I mean, if I wasn't shooting and editing video, I would not need this space. But Brian, I got footage from a show the other night with 2 cameras running, bringing it into my laptop. It's 120 gigabytes of video footage from one project I'm working on. So even the 1 terabyte, I've already maxed it out, because I was using external drives all the time with my previous laptop. I had a 512 gigabyte drive on my previous one, and I did all my work on external drives, and I really wanted to get away from external drives for stuff I'm working on. So the goal was to be able to put everything in that I want to work on it, and then I can offload it back out to a drive when I'm done. But unfortunately, that's not quite panned out the way I wanted, because 1 terabyte is still not quite enough. As nice as it is to grow your storage on your laptop, the size of files that you could be working on, whether it's photographs or video or anything else, are growing as well. They're getting more quality, they're getting bigger. So video, shooting 4K video and trying to do stuff with it on the laptop is very takes up a lot of space. But I did go up on the storage for that reason, and I'm happy I doubled my storage. Could I have quadrupled it? Yes, and been very, very happy. But
well, let me give just a quick counter argument to that, and it's to agree. I completely agree. If you're working with video, to where it's going to be an extra really cumbersome step for you to process something, go plug in, go put it on an external drive, or even having it wirelessly trying to move it over there on its own, which takes forever, right? On the flip side, I would say, if you're someone who you don't think that like one project is going to max you out, then sometimes having a smaller space means that it forces you to get in the habit of putting things external, putting things on another drive, because the more things that get stacked up on your computer, they're going to be, I think there's more problems that can happen in terms of slowing down and all of that. So I think, to me, it's always one of those good things to think it should be part of your workflow to say, I'm working as I'm at. So for me, if I'm out and about, I'd say 99% of the time I'm on Wi-Fi somewhere, right? I'm on internet somewhere. But if I'm not, I'm storing on local, but really I'm doing that as a very temporary thing, so that when I get back, it automatically kind of syncs up somewhere else so that I can get it off to my device. So I'd say, unless you have a real need, look for getting in the habit of keeping things off device a little bit more, having cloud storage, or having an additional hard drive space, because I think sometimes having a larger hard drive means that you then forget about the process of unloading. So all of a sudden you max out really, really quickly, and then you're stuck with a slowdown or something else that's happening. So,
well, and if I can, I'm skipping ahead a little bit, because we haven't talked about the actual hardware, the actual physical laptop yet, and kind of the pros and cons of it that we're going to talk about. But I'm just going to go ahead and tease and skip ahead. There is a port on this particular laptop that you and I both own now, that I've actually kind of really come around on different ways to use it. And that is that smart media, smart card slot, because even for a recent project, I had to acquire some new cards to use for recording video on cameras. I can get a 128 gigabyte smart media card. That's a really fast card, meaning it can play back 4K video and record 4K video on a camera. 128 gigabyte card for like $30.
Yeah. Yeah.
At that point, you start to think, wait a minute. Okay, now if I can actually have like several of these cards at 25 to $30 each, and that all of a sudden starts to give you some more easy space instead of having to power up a drive and hook it up and all that. I like having it built in, so I could actually have a small card. You can go up to even a terabyte of a smart media card nowadays. Pop it in the side of this thing, and you basically doubled your storage. At least having it, not going to run your system off of it. You're not going to boot off that thing, but to put files that you just need to access sometimes.
So you can save directly to it.
Capability without having to worry about hooking up an external drive and cables and adapters and all that. So that is a nice function of this that helps on that storage side of things for sure.
So Alan, I've rarely used SD cards other than to download photos or something, but would you feel comfortable putting a SD card in the side, closing the laptop, carrying the laptop around with it in? So it sticks out a little bit. It sticks out a little bit so you can still grab it, right? Do you feel comfortable with that?
Have I done it? Yes. Was I 100% comfortable? No. But having it in there permanently, I'm not necessarily advocating for that. But, I like the idea of knowing that if I want to have a little stack of cards, I'm like, hey, I've got a project that I was working on one card that has all the footage, so I can just actually pop it in and run it off of that.
Yeah.
When I'm done, pop it back out and put it on the desk. If I had to go somewhere and I needed it to be in there to work on that project, I could put it in there. I just got to be more mindful of it because it does stick out about about a quarter of an inch?
Quarter of an inch, probably. Yeah. Enough for you to grab it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Just enough that if you're putting this into a tight book bag, you want to be very mindful of it.
Yeah.
If you're just carrying it, I think it's fine to have it in the side of it, but it is something to be mindful of. All right.
All right. Well, we started into the.
I think we're you and I kind of went with the M1 Pro chip. I think I just did the 8-core. Well, maybe I did the 10-core. I think I did the 10-core CPU. Because I think the model I got with the 32 gigs and the 1 terabyte storage, I think that's kind of the configuration it came with. I don't remember offhand. Anyway, you have a lot of options on CPU and GPU, how many cores, which basically means it's just really talking about how powerful they are. CPU is your central processing unit. That's doing all the computing work for you. Graphics processing unit is your GPU. How good are the graphics that are playing, and can it play back high quality, high definition, fast frame rate video on your screen is really what the GPU stands for. So those are all the decisions you got to make when you're configuring this.
So I have an 8-core, just FYI, the 8-core, and of course we haven't mentioned, just since we are talking about processor. I mean, what are your impressions? What are your impressions on speed of this computer?
So I think it's important for people to go in with a little bit of a good frame of reference on this. I mean, there's been so much hype and talk about how fast these chips are and how fast these computers are. And look, yes, they are fast. Okay, they are good computers. If you've come from a Mac in the last 5 or 6 years, I mean, obviously things are going to run faster. I think you're going to be pleased with the speed. Don't expect it to be, multiple times faster than what you've been getting. I mean, I think you got to be very realistic with your expectations on this. Everything runs really great. Boot up time is really nice and fast. Application opening time, I definitely see a difference in applications opening quicker. The biggest point where I see improvement, and unfortunately it's not going to be the case for everybody, but working in video, when I have to render out, export out videos I work on, that has always been the most time-consuming thing, and it has cut that time down at least in half for me to export and render things. So, but again, I know that's not everybody's typical workflow, so your mileage is going to vary. I mean, if you're someone who just email, word processing, some fairly routine task on a computer, you may not be just blown away by the speed as much. I don't know. I mean, general daily day operations, yes, it is brisker, it's faster for me, but I have heard some people who bought a new laptop and are like, well, I expected this thing to be, 3-4 times faster than what I was used to. And it's not. Well, it's hard to perceive speed differences, but I mean, it is very clear that this thing runs really, really nice and smooth and fast. Yeah. That's kind of my take on it. Brian, what's been your thoughts on
it? I actually think it's very, very snappy. And I think when people might suggest they don't recognize a big difference, it may be that you're not pushing your computer before, because Macs have always been really, really good at, opening speed and things like that. And I think they've always been fairly good, but these are, that's for me, at least, for going from a 2017 to this machine, it's much snappier. It opens things quicker. It processes certain things a lot faster. Certain little tasks that would take me, several more seconds for something to come up or to do are happening a lot faster. And so that's great. I mean, that's certainly, I see what I had hoped to see, which would be, all right, less frustrations with kind of something waiting. And it wasn't horrible. It was just, you started to notice that certain apps would be hung a little longer and needing that issue. So, so that part I think is good. I think, as you mentioned, the when you open it up, it pops on really, really quickly, which is another piece that I really like. It feels like it is ready to rock and roll, super fast. And even connecting to external monitors, I think it's a little quicker at doing some of that. So yeah, for me, the speed has been a nice improvement. So
I'll just give one example, and he will remain nameless. The individual I'm going to talk about, someone I know.
Is it our dad?
No.
Okay.
Someone I know went out and bought a new MacBook Pro, and they maxed it out. Like, maxed out.
Okay.
Like every spec. Okay. The highest possible level of MacBook Pro you could get. The main goal was that they did not want any spinning beach balls, meaning they did not want anything slowing down at all. And it was funny because I was talking with this individual and I was admiring the laptop and realizing that I might have been able to actually swap my laptop with this person's, and they never know. Even realized it, because they do look so identical. And this is not someone who's going in and really examining all the specs afterwards. They just wanted the best they could get. And they got frustrated after a week because they had text edit, the actual text editor on there, was spinning a beach ball. Now, I'm not saying that that's an indictment of the laptop at all. It is a fast machine. But again, mileage will vary based on what your expectations are and what you're doing day to day on it.
Yeah.
Final Cut Pro is definitely, for me, video editing is much, much slicker and faster and snappier to use, and exporting is great. Do I see a tons of difference in a Microsoft Word type application? A little bit, enough to say that, yeah, something's happening there, but it's going to vary on your use. And I think the overall impression is, yes, it's a much, much faster laptop in many cases. So, yeah. Let's talk about the actual machine, like the hardware itself.
Okay? Yeah, structure. Sure.
Yeah, because as you can see from the photo here, it's still, for most people looking at this, it's going to look like a typical MacBook Pro, but there are a few very important key differences to highlight on this. And Brian, the picture I'm showing right here is probably one of the biggest reasons I was so eager to upgrade to this laptop. For a couple things. One, I've already mentioned the Smart Media card that's on there. To the far left on that. That is key for me. I use that several times a day. Even today, offloading hours and hours of video footage off of smart cards. I love being able to just pop that in. I could do that even running off a battery somewhere else in a different room and still be bringing the stuff in. It was great. Number two, there is an HDMI port on the side of this thing. So it used to be in the previous version, you had to get adapters for everything. So you had to go out of USBC, get an adapter to go to HDMI to connect to any standard monitor or TV set. Now you can do it straight out of the box. Now, you can still hook up a USB-C to HDMI or another adapter and still use it to power your monitor. But you have the option now of just plugging straight into your monitor, no adapter needed, and you've got video out on that.
Yep.
That's huge. That was so nice. It's coming so handy the last month or so.
Yeah, and just on a side, because I know you're going to move forward with another one, but that was the number one reason I went with this computer.
Number one.
The number one. Yeah, is I did not during my day-to-day usage, I did not want to deal with dongles. And the only time that I am day-to-day using a dongle is to go and teach a class in a room where I'm connecting via HDMI. So I have to remember to make sure I have that dongle with me each time I go to that room. Now I no longer have to remember that. So that was a real key factor, is that this was the lowest model I could get that had the HDMI port. And I think you and I both, Alan, we may have been tracking along the way, but I think still my favorite laptop of all time was, I think it was a 2013 MacBook Pro. It was a beast, right? It was a pretty heavy MacBook, but it had an HDMI port in it. It had an SD card in it. And it was my favorite one of all time. I actually hated the fact that when I left that, went to the 2017, which I actually did not like, and spent the last several years not liking it at all. That was something I really wish I had back. And this feels like we went back to that machine. We went back and updated the 2013 MacBook Pro, which was very similar to this. It just had USB A's instead of USB C's.
No, I agree. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, the HDMI is huge. Now, granted, I still kind of harken back to the fact that I still have to use a hub, a USB-C hub, at both my home office and my office because I still have some legacy USB drives I have to use and access. I've got microphone through USB-A. I've got a couple other cables that are still USB-A. So I have a hub to plug all those in. But it is nice to know that I don't rely on the HDMI for that. I can plug that straight in. But then when I do go somewhere where I need to hook up to a projector, or I need to hook up to another screen in a conference room or something, I can do that with the HDMI without having to take an adapter. And that's
that's what I meant. I have a hub at both place locations, and all I have is one little cord. Once I set it down, I plug one cord in and I'm good. I'm talking about going day to day. I do not want to have to remember to carry dongles, right? So I do not want to carry dongles. Yeah.
So HDMI port was huge for me. Coming back to having smart media was also huge. We've got 3 USB-C ports, which is plenty. That's all I need on that end.
Yeah.
But the fact is, we don't have to tie up one of those USB-C ports for power because we actually have a MagSafe power on there now.
Thank goodness, got back the MagSafe.
I love the MagSafe.
Yep.
You do too, right?
I do. I absolutely. Yeah. I've been missing it ever since the 2013.
The last laptop where you had to power it up, the plug-in, the power adapter plug was a USB-C end to plug into the laptop. Although I love the ubiquity of a single port that can be used for many different purposes, I still found myself so nervous anytime I have my laptop out somewhere about tripping over the power cable. Because on a USB-C, if it's in there and it's a pretty snug connection, if you trip over that cord, your laptop is going with it. It's not coming out of that. It's not popping out of your laptop very easily. MagSafe, that's the whole point. It's magnet. It's a magnet-based adapter. The idea is that you could trip, you could snag your power cord, and it just pulls it away from the laptop. Doesn't bring the laptop down crashing with it.
Right.
And I love that.
So good.
I really
so
do.
good. Yep. And Alan, I don't know about you, the USB-C, the port itself, given that you were using it all the time for power and other things, I don't know about you, but I felt like the last laptop I had, and maybe this just progressively changed over time, but I felt like the USB-C ports were loose.
Yeah.
I think over time I felt like they were looser. Right now, these, and again, I don't know if this is the way my old one felt back when I first got it, but it feels like these go in, they're tight, and they actually kind of snap in almost. There's a little click at the end that I don't feel like I got before.
Honestly, and again, I don't remember, Brian, if they were that way when we first got those previous laptops or not.
But I think the key is that when you're using it for power, it's always in there. You are snagging it. You are, going in and out of that port. I don't have to use that port too often. I use it for, that's the one connection I put in when I am at a desk. I put one cord in that runs my screen and my USB A's. but it's at a desk, which means it's not on my lap. It's not jiggling around. So I really think those ports are, have a problem in that they can get loosened really easily. And so I'm super happy that we don't have power there. And having USB means I'm not plugging in a dongle, which also would be kind of moving around and shaking and things. So I just think this is going to have a little bit more longevity for me as well.
Yeah, I agree. The only other port there is an audio headphone jack. They still have not gotten rid of the analog, or I guess it's digital, but the actual physical audio jack for headphones, which is great. I still love that.
Yep.
Even though I don't really use wired headphones with my laptops anymore, there's enough situations where I have to hook up to something or plug up to a speaker or plug up to something, and just knowing I've got that easy digital audio out jack on the side of the Mac is still, I'll be very upset when that goes away. I feel like it will be at some point. There'll be a future generation where they don't have those on there and everything is just Bluetooth audio or just AirPods off your Mac. But until then, I love having the audio jack as well.
Yep.
One thing about this, Brian, before we move on from this profile view, one thing that never gets talked about, but I'm really happy with, are the feet on the bottom.
Okay, I was going to ask you. Yep.
Yeah, I like them. They're bigger. They're more substantial. They do kind of jut out a little bit more in the bottom, but I don't know. It just feels a little sturdier. Feels a little more solid to me that way. So I like them.
Yeah, I don't. So we can disagree on at least one, but only for one major. Well, actually two situations, and one is both of my situations in where I put it on the desk, both at work and here at home. At home, I'm using, I think you and I have talked about it before, I'm using one of the, I can't remember. Is it a Belkin? It might be a Belkin. That it kind of, the back of the computer sits up on this thing that has lots of ports in the back. Yeah. So a little wedge, right? And that's another piece that I have to make sure is sitting on there. Like I keep getting it off a little bit and it'll kind of jump down. But probably a more problematic thing for me is that my previous laptop, so at work, I have a standing desk, and the standing desk has like a two-tiered, one tier that has where you're sitting your monitor, and then there's a tier down below where I have my keyboard, right? So this thing has kind of got its own little platform for the monitor up above where my keyboard goes, and then I'll kind of stand everything up. But because my monitor takes up most of that space, I have my laptop on the side of it, kind of on hanging partly off the platform, partly on. And previously, my old one, the feet didn't matter. Like it felt like it was stable. Now I put it on there and I've got 1 foot off, and it feels like that chair that you've lost the pad on in one corner that constantly wobbles all the time. So I just think for a use case, I'm having to try to figure out how do I find a spot on the desk to put it, because it doesn't make sense with these big feet. Now I get it. It's great. If I'm using it on a table the whole time, that's fantastic. But that also makes me wonder why did they have these feet? Is it heat dispersion? Is it the fact that it shouldn't be on your lap anymore? Right. I mean, there's lots of kind of questions about those feet. Is it trying to protect?
I wrote them? Is it all the letters I wrote them saying,
could be,
please, can you make
I'm sure that it had something to do with it. Yeah. That should. Okay. Well, I've got other things we need to get into. Yeah.
It's not the reason I upgraded my laptop, but it was a nice little bonus for me in my personal situation. So
yeah, I mean, we just spent 10 minutes on the audio port and the feet. So we might need to move on to a little bit more important things.
What do you want to talk about next? What
Well, I've got four things that stand out to me in terms of the structure of this thing.
Pop them up.
Okay. And one, we're not gonna say too much about, other than the camera. Camera is fantastic.
Okay, so
the built-in camera, I think, is so much better. The built-in FaceTime camera.
Let me get you a good picture of that if we have one somewhere. That's the FaceTime camera that is built into the top of the laptop.
Correct.
I don't know if we have I know they tout that, so it should be here it is. Yeah.
Yep.
So it is a 1080p.
It's much better.
Camera.
It's much better than it was before.
It was a 720 camera before, 720 HD, which is still, spec wise is okay, but you could definitely tell when you were comparing your webcam to other people's on newer laptops, it wasn't quite holding up. And especially with Apple, who's become so well known for really great cameras on their iPhones and devices like that, to kind of have their Mac with a subpar camera was a little frustrating for a while. So you're right. It is much better now.
It's much better. It's not as good as the iPhone. So people will just be ready for that. It's not, and it probably doesn't have to be, because again, you tend to use it in a more controlled environment. But I am excited about, the future Mac OS that'll allow you to potentially use your phone as a webcam, because then I'll get that better quality anyway. But I found this was much, much better. So I think that's another good thing if you're frustrated with the webcam that you currently have. I currently am not using that. That's the one problem, is that when you're using an external monitor, it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to use. So now I'm trying to think of, do I switch and have my computer as my main monitor and then the other one as the side, because my computer's over here. So I would actually love to use that new one.
That is my setup, by the way. So
yeah. Well, it's just weird. Yeah, I mean, you're just weird. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my laptop screen is my primary, like that's what I'm looking at right now. My monitor, and I'm getting ready to add a second monitor over here or on my sides. Because I do love using the built-in camera on the laptop. So it just works for that. So,
so that's one thing. Number two, and I was not expecting this at all, the speakers. The sound out of this is so much better than what I had previous. Now, I'd like to know if it was the case with you, because you had a 15-inch, right? So I had a 13-inch before, and there really wasn't any speakers. I mean, I think there might have been very small ones, but because of the real estate, the first time I turned it on and I started hearing, like, you could hear bass in this one, and it felt like there was a really deep kind of sound coming from it. And it's not going to replace a speaker, but the fact that if you're watching a movie on your lap, it is a much better experience. Of course, use your headphones, but the sound is much better. It's given that I've got speakers on the sides of the keyboard now, so that's really great. Yeah, no, I was not expecting that.
It is good sound. I'm not the one to be able to tell you if it was significantly better than the last computer, because my last computer actually had a sound speaker issue where most of the time sound was only coming out in full force on one side of the laptop. And it was something that was going to cost a pretty penny to try to get replaced. And I knew I was going to be upgrading soon, so I didn't worry about it. So I don't know, but it sounds really good. I don't know how much better it was than before, but it is a good sounding laptop for sure. I've watched a couple movies just on my laptop, no headphones, just watching it on my lap and feeling like I heard a really good sound experience.
Yep, agreed. And then I've got one other before a more obvious one that I think it deserves a little discussion, but I was not expecting the Touch ID to be that much better. The Touch ID, I don't think I've put my finger yet. It's like the moment I get it anywhere close, it opens. Whereas it used to be, I'd have to press, and sometimes I'd have to move my finger around because it was a much smaller sensor. This is a big sensor, and it actually looks a little bit too big. I also thought it looks a little kind of plasticky when I first got it. But man, it is so much better. It recognizes the finger to be able to open up, which is good, because that was often a big frustration where on my previous laptop, it had Touch ID, but you'd be going in and say, now, use your finger. And the way I have my setup, my laptop's usually to the side. So, okay, so I'm working way over there, and maybe I'm coming from a different angle, it wouldn't recognize. Now, I mean, this one is significantly better in that it's, sensors must be, larger. It must be, seeing things a little bit cleaner. So much better. So that was, again, another surprise I was not expecting. I wasn't really looking for that. So. Yep.
No, the Touch ID is wonderful. It's up in the top right corner on the screen you're looking at right now. It's it's great. It worked. I have not had any issues with it. Yeah. It's like you said, it's registered every single time I've used it.
Yep. Sure. And if you see that, that's as big as a key. That's as big as an actual letter key, whereas previously it was probably a half to a quarter of a key size, and so it wasn't taking up much space, but it also took a little bit more to recognize your finger, so which was frustrating.
So, Brian, do you use the keyboard on the laptop itself much?
Not a ton. I always have an external keyboard when I'm at one of my two office spots, mainly because I use key input a lot, like the number input. And so I have laptops that have number input, a number keypad on the side, which, is necessary. But the times I have typed on it, Alan, I think I've talked about before, the last keyboard I had made me drove me absolutely nuts. I despised it. It was loud, clicking sound constantly. I know this is maybe getting a little too personal, but I used to work in, my wife would go to sleep and I'd go sit on the other side of the bed and work. I couldn't do that with that keyboard. I mean, it was so loud, right? I couldn't type. I could go and maybe do mouse and things like that. This is much quieter. Finally, they fixed the keyboard over the last few years. Much better. So I will say I have some mistypes because I don't know if the layout's slightly different or something. I do have a keyboard cover on it right now because I bought a full cover because I didn't want to screw up my screen at all initially. But I don't like typing with a keyboard cover at all. It feels like I'm not really engaged with it. But the times I've taken it off, it's nice. It's a really nice keyboard.
Yeah, it's a good keyboard. For people who were concerned about what they heard about the Mac laptop keyboards the last 3 or 4 years, have some comfort knowing they are much better now.
Yep.
Maybe not perfect. I mean, I still think there's a lot of people out there, some pundits say it's still not the best laptop keyboard it can be, but compared to where it was, it is significantly better. And for most people, it's going to be fine. It's going to be good use on that.
I still would like to see them kind of provide a little bit of haptic feedback with the keyboard. When in haptic feedback, for those who don't know, that's, you touch the key and then it also gives you a tiny vibration or something to give you that feeling of travel, because some of the best keyboards are the old keyboards that have really tall keys and you were pushing them, you were really going at it and you could feel aggressive with it and feel like you knew exactly when it was pressing and you typed that way. And then it got to be where the keys got shallower and shallower because the laptop got shallower and shallower, right? So the travel was much less, and they tried to offset that by some of the clicks and some of those things that were going with it. So this is softer, but I also feel like it would be really cool for them to eventually kind of maybe even develop to where you don't have to touch that much. You can go fairly quick, but yet it's constantly providing a little haptic feedback like your phone now. By the way, for those who don't know, the new version of the phone, you can turn on haptic feedback again. Which is great. Super, super nice. So that's something I'd love to see them do eventually. And I don't know if the use cases, but I just think they could offset some of the lack of travel with a feeling of travel on some of these. But
what other notes did you have on the laptop?
Well, the only other one the only one I mentioned is just I am so incredibly happy to have gotten rid of the touch bar. So our last computer had the touch bar.
Touch bar, for those not quite familiar with that was the strip above the keyboard. Like in the photo here, it would have been in that gray area above the keyboard. It was a interactive touch strip that some apps would tie into and have some different functions available there. And then you had some general computer functions like volume up and down and some others on that strip. The Touch ID, if I remember correctly, was on the far end of that Touch ID. Or touch bar as well. I loved the idea of the touch bar when it first came out. I thought it looked cool. I thought it would come in super handy. And then I found myself hardly ever touching it.
Yep.
So
same.
I did feel like there was I always wondered if there was some extra processing that was kind of being robbed to power and manage that touch bar. And so that always bothered me. I wondered if battery life was getting a little more consumed by having to power that on the whole time. So the fact that I very hardly ever used it and now they're gone, I don't miss it.
Well, let me also maybe give a quick correction to what you said. You said that it would be right up there where the gray is. It actually would take away the top row. So here's the problem, right? So for people that don't know, think to yourself about how many times do I use the physical keys that are at the top row of the keyboard? Escape, the function keys, the volume up, volume down. All of those got replaced in the previous touch bar buy the touch bar. So it was a one strip, no buttons. Everything was touch buttons. They would appear, disappear based on what app you were in. And I can't tell you the number of times that I needed to press escape, that I had to then look at the keyboard to figure out where escape was. Was it there? No, I need to press one more button before I can get to the escape to have it show up. Or the number of times that I've reached up to try to do Touch ID and accidentally hit whatever button was next to Touch ID on the touch bar and didn't realize it until it was too late. Yeah. So I just missed the physical keys. I was with you. I thought, boy, what a great opportunity to have dynamic keys. And I still think, by the way, this is my dream. Eventually, keys become glass top keys that every key could change. You could go and set up your keyboard however you want to set it up. And they still be travel keys and everything, but you could set it up so that they're colored. You could set it up so that only certain ones show up. Maybe you could set it up so that the keyboard shortcuts that you and I talked about in our last episode would show up so that you could do that. But yet the keys are still there. The physical keys are there.
A different keyboard setup based on the app you're using.
I mean, imagine you're playing a game and some of those keys become actual arrows and things that you're doing for a game. So I just think that's where it needs to go eventually. And I know that's tough and expensive. You would be having basically an LED screen on each one of those keys. But that's what they tried to do, the entry of the touch bar. And I just don't think it was executed well at all. I mean, and for those who are not sure about this, think to yourself, if you're going to, how often are you looking at the keyboard? If you're someone who's typing, right, do you look at the keyboard as you type? And if you don't, then having to use a touch bar means you have to learn to look at the keyboard to figure out what's there, where it is, unless you're really, really good at knowing, here's what this should be, but you can't feel anything. So I found myself having to take my hands off, look to see what was there, then press again to do volume or something like that.
Sure.
I just didn't like it. So yeah, I'm very, very happy. Now, this goes back to the decision process again. I personally would have gone with a 13-inch MacBook Pro had the 13-inch not had a touch bar and had the 13-inch had a HDMI. If those two things, I would have spent and just gone with the 13-inch because those were my two big things.
Yeah.
Given that right now, if you have a 13-inch, you have to have a touch bar, and that is just that was a deal breaker for me.
Well, we'll show the models that are currently existing here in just a minute, kind of expand on that a bit. But yeah, the touch bar, I haven't missed it one bit. My only question, Brian, and I'm sorry to be doing this here on the show, but I do have a question. How do you adjust the brightness of the keyboard? The keys on the keyboard? Do you know?
Well, let's see.
Currently, my keyboard got a keyboard cover on it, which also covers the brightness. So it's not a problem for me. But as I was looking at my keys and seeing how they light up, I did find a setting in the control panels for allowing the brightness of your keys to be controlled by ambient light. So if it's really bright outside, it'll dim down the lights on the keyboard. But I thought, that's one thing I know that at least on the touch bar days, I could go in and control the actual brightness of the keys on the keyboard, but I don't know any way to do that now.
That's a good question because I don't either.
That'll be a mystery we'll have to solve for next time.
Yeah.
Anyway, just the only thing I was thought about. I was trying to think of practical applications for the touch bar, and the only thing I could come up with is, well, I could do the keyboard brightness on it, I know, and not have to tie up a function key to do it on a physical keyboard. So that was one thing.
Yeah.
All right.
Wow, but I don't know, but I just ran across while trying to do it. I just ran across a really interesting setting though.
Oh yeah.
Command F1.
Should I do it right now?
Well, good luck.
Command F1. What did I do?
And then do it again. Yeah. It mirrors your screen if you've got an external monitor and you click it in, it turns it off. That's pretty interesting. I don't know how likely that is to do, but it is pretty interesting. I was thinking that it would have been one of the function of the brightness of the screen. Like you've got the two brightness screen buttons, a function, one of those, but it doesn't. And, I'm with you. And I have to tell people that is one thing I I had purchased originally a keyboard cover that went along with a case cover, like that snaps on the outside just to protect it. And I sent it back because it covered all the lights of the keyboard. And so I switched and went with a clear one. And now I have a clear one that everything shows through just for that reason, because I do like the fact of being able to type and have those buttons showing.
Yeah,
so
my keyboard cover does cover up the brightness of the keys,
yeah,
which is a little bit, but again, I
it's a
very
bummer.
rarely use the keyboard on the laptop itself.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
Brian, so that is kind of your, I mean, I'm echoing everything you're saying about this laptop. I'm happy with,
Yeah.
the ports were probably the biggest thing for me to really go ahead and make me get encouraged to go ahead and upgrade. The speed improvement obviously was, without question, very impressive from where I came from. I like the form factor. I like everything about it from that standpoint. Do you have any issues? Do you have any misgivings or things that you kind of take away you wish were different with this laptop?
I have one.
Okay.
It's heavy. This thing is
heavy.
heavy. Yeah, now you're coming from a 15. You're coming from 15 to a 14. I'm coming from 13, and it is significantly heavier. This is actually reminiscent of the 2013 MacBook Pro that we used before.
It is as heavy as the 15-inch I used to have.
Yeah, okay.
So, I mean, it's a smaller machine, but it is just as heavy.
No, this is a heavy beast.
Heavy.
Yep.
I don't mind it. I like feeling something more substantial in my hand. I'm not one who does really well with really light laptops, or the Airs I couldn't really do too well with. I like having something substantial, and it doesn't weigh down my bag any more than my previous laptop did, so I don't really notice it much.
Yeah,
But,
yeah,
you're right though. It is
no,
heavy.
and I will say that I had someone come to me last week and asking for my advice on buying a new Mac laptop, and that was the deciding factor. When I finally, I told her, I said, I have to tell you, she's coming from an Air, and she was looking at the Pro and saying, I really like the look of it. I said, hold on a second, let me go get mine, because you're going to want to feel this. And she's like, oh, no, that that drives me nuts. That's heavy. Yeah. So she went straight back to the Air, which honestly, guys, the Air is really, really good right now. So if you're someone that is going from an old Air, you're going to be super impressed with the new, the new chips and those Airs. I personally love the fact that they don't, have an angled front anymore, to a point that they are kind of more consistent all the way through, a little bit more standard look. But the Airs are good. And honestly, like I said, if it wasn't for that port, that HDMI port was the big reason I moved right up to a Pro level. So
if I'm understanding correctly, if a MacBook Air had an HDMI port on the side of it,
I probably have it right now.
That would probably be, you'd probably
have it.
You'd probably get the high-end MacBook
Air. I'd max out a MacBook Air for myself. Yeah. Now, I love the idea of the Pro. I love I've always had a Pro for the last several, so I've always kind of had this fear of going to an Air that I would run into some issues. But the MacBook Airs are really snappy too. They're really, really good right now. And if it would have had an HDMI port, which I know it couldn't have because of the size, but that would have been a real competitor for me, because then I could have maxed out a lot of things and felt okay about it with price.
So Brian, let's kind of wrap up by talking about the lineup of MacBook laptops right now, because it's a little bit of a weird space right now.
Yeah.
And I've had several people ask me just in the last couple of weeks about recommendations on a MacBook, and I have to kind of coach them through a few caveats here to know. As we mentioned, there are the MacBook Airs and there's the MacBook Pros, but there are some differences here to be aware of. You see on the screen, for those of you listening, there's 4 columns up here. 2 MacBook Air models and 2 versions of MacBook Pro models. And there are some differences here, so just to keep in mind. As Brian was saying, the MacBook Air is a great laptop. They continue to improve on it. It is the lighter, more portable, quote, lesser powered, but yet this is still much, much faster than other MacBook Airs have been, and still a very, very strong, powerful computer. But they have a version of it that's the M1 chip, using the M1 chip. That's the lowest entry-level model. And then you've got a higher level MacBook Air using an M2 chip. So obviously it's going to be a faster performance. It's going to be a little more modern processor than the other one is. And it's a slight bit larger on the display, like less than half an inch smaller than what you got on the previous model. some nice performance improvements, but your MacBook Air is still kind of your laptop if you're wanting something to be, you don't need something substantial. You're not a power user. You're looking for just good general computing. I mean, hey, if you're doing a lot of email, web surfing, maybe some photo work, it's fine. It will do photos great. But you're not needing to get into heavy processing work on anything. Or you're not needing to have tons of applications open simultaneously and running. The MacBook Air is a really great option. And as Brian mentioned, it's a lot lighter. It's meant to be more portable than the MacBook Pro is. So you got two options. Both are good. It's just a matter of, do you want to spend a little bit more and get the newer chip and getting a little bit larger screen size on it. So,
Yep.
And I think that screen size, Brian, is only because the bevel is smaller.
A notch. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they took advantage of the notch.
Smaller. I think the actual physical dimensions are about the same on the actual laptop. It's just they made a smaller bezel around the inside of the screen with the M2 version, so it's got a slightly bigger screen.
Yep.
So then we flip over to the MacBook Pros, and that's where things I think are still a little weird. And that you've got two different versions of MacBook Pros. You've got the MacBook Pro 13-inch. Then you've got a MacBook Pro 14 and 16. And that's what Brian and I have been talking about for the last hour. We have it, the 14-inch in that far right column version. The big difference, there's several differences, a lot more differences between these two than you had in the two MacBook Airs. Not only screen size, MacBook Pro 13 is, of course, a little smaller unit, but it's using an M2 chip, which they just rolled out in the last couple months, a MacBook Pro with an M2 chip on it. However, as Brian mentioned, this one does not have an HDMI port on the side.
Right.
It is using the touch bar, which was on the previous generation of MacBook Pros. And the ports are all the same. I think it's just USB-C ports, just like it was in the previous model. It's a lot cheaper. I mean, they start at $1,300 compared to the other Pro models. But the performance isn't quite there on the same level, even just looking through some of these specs. Storage can't go up as high. RAM can't go up as high. The FaceTime camera on it is still 720, not 1080p, so it's not great resolution on the camera. It's got the touch bar. So it's almost like it's that hybrid in the middle. I hate that they call this the MacBook Pro. I kind of wish they had just gone with MacBook personally. But this is their middle of the road option. This is I want to have something that's more powerful than an Air, but I don't want to spend a lot more money, and I don't need it to be top of the line either. So,
no, I really wish they didn't do this. Well, and we know why they did. Not to be totally negative on Apple, but that's the same design as what you and I had before. That's the same exact case, everything's the same about it, except they did update the keyboard, right? So, but the touch bar is still there. The size is still the same. So basically, it's like they had a bunch of these still laying around. They had what they thought was a really good design, and they wanted to throw a new chip in it. And they got the new chip and the new keyboard. So I feel like, we're just not, I think if they would have done the 13-inch and say they had like or maybe a 12, it would be really cool actually if they would have done a 12, a 14, and a 16 of the MacBook Pro, and they all have the same form factor. Maybe one didn't have the speakers or something like that, but as it is, they now they did add some speakers. I don't know if the last version you and I had the same speaker set there on the sides, but I don't think it. Oh, it did. Okay, it did. Yeah, it certainly wasn't nearly as good. No. And the keyboard is a little bit different, but there you can see the touch bar. They've changed that up a little bit because they added an escape key back, which was a big argument people had. Is that now there's an escape key back on that keyboard. So the keyboard itself is better. The touch bar itself is a little better because it doesn't have escape as an option. But it just didn't make sense to me, because if I was going to pay more for a Pro, then I needed at least to have something good out of it. And I felt like I was missing what I could have gotten with the HDMI port. And I was gaining something I didn't want, which was a touch bar. So to me, it was a no-brainer that this was not going to be the one for me. So,
I mean, I will say, I agree with you, Brian, 100%. This is not the laptop I needed to get either. So that's why I went with the 14-inch. But people I've talked to where they are in that kind of middle ground where it's like, I want a good, powerful computer.
Yep.
I want to do some things, but I'm not, I'm not basing my entire living off of doing things as fast as possible or doing a lot of high end graphics work. It's an okay model. It's just, the touch bar's there. You don't have the ports on the side that you do with the pro level, the true pro level ones. It's a little bit of it's a weird hybrid version, still borrowing from the past. And if you're okay with all of those, I think it's a good machine, especially for the price. I mean, it's a lot cheaper than the high end pros, but if you're not a fan of the touch bar, if you really want that flexibility on your ports, like with the smart media card, with the HDMI port and so forth, you want the MagSafe, which again is something very important that this 13-inch does not have. There's just a lot of reasons to look at the higher end MacBook Pros if you can instead. I've got a feeling that this will be a model that within a year or two, we're not going to see.
No, it'll get phased out. Yeah, I agree.
It'll be phased out and everything's going to look like everything's going to lean into the Air side very heavy, or it's going to lean into the Pro side very heavy. And this middle ground's not really going to be I don't think a viable space for them.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and honestly, if someone wants a touch bar, if there are people that really love that and that starts to take off and have some use cases, there just needs to be an option to say, do I want a touch bar or not? Right. They just need to have kind of a different keyboard slide in that goes for the model that you want. So I want a 14-inch MacBook Pro with the touch bar. That should be an option as opposed to having a whole different line that builds it in. So
I think in general, though, I mean, look, compared to where the MacBook Pro line or MacBook line was several years ago, it's a much, much stronger lineup. I can honestly say I think any of these machines are good machines, especially powered by the M1 chips or M2 chips that they have from Apple. They're making a lot of good improvements across the board on them. I think the MacBook Pro 14-inch right now it's the best laptop I've used. It's gaining in my esteem as I use it every day. I'm very happy with it. That alone, I couldn't have said that the last several years with the previous version I had. So
yeah,
I think that's good. Yeah,
agreed.
They're in a good spot, and I'm very happy with the purchase here. Any other thoughts there, Brian?
No. I mean, I like them too. I think they've got some cleaning up to do. In terms of trying to really figure out what the Air and the Pro is, and trying to kind of get rid of. Once they get rid of that one that we just talked about, and have the Pros that are of this form factor, then they have the Airs that are the other form factor, and I think it starts to make pretty simple. Yeah. They got rid of the MacBooks, which if you're going to have 3, have a MacBook. But if you're only going to have 2, this is the way to go, right? Yeah. And you can really start to distinguish the 2 at this point. But man, they're really, really good. And again, jumping from an Intel processor to a M1, I'm super, super happy with the snappiness of this thing. Yeah. M2, from my understanding, is not necessarily that it's that much better. It is a bigger chip. It can do a little bit more. It's got more capabilities. I don't think people should look at it as, oh my God, it's going to be twice as fast. It's not that. No, it is just, I think it has some more capabilities of things that it can build upon. I think they're doing a really good job right now. So I really like these.
Yeah. The M2 chip is more of an incremental upgrade than anything major. So don't get confused by M1, M2. The M2 is almost like more of a 1.2, it's like a little bump up. There are some improvements, but it's not dramatic. It's not anything you need to worry about, I don't think, moving to. It's good stuff. It's really good. My perfect world, Brian, at one point in the future would be that there are 2 body styles of laptops. There's the Air and the Pro. You choose Air or Pro, and based on that, you then can choose from several different screen sizes. Could be 13, could be 14, could be 16 on the Pro. Maybe maybe you got it back to 11 and 13 on the Air. Okay. And then you can also choose, if the touch bar sticks around, do you want touch bar on your model or not? And then you still have the ports based on the Pro has a certain set of ports. The Air has a certain set of ports. Yeah. Keep the body style consistent between these 2 versions, and you can just adjust size, and you can adjust specs and RAM and storage and everything for each model. That to me would be really nice to be able to go in and say, yep, I want a MacBook Pro, but I want this size screen. Do I want a touch bar or not? And it comes with these ports by default, and then I can configure everything on the inside, specs wise I want. This is the closest we've gotten to that, but we're still not quite there yet.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Well, that is our kind of state of our personal Mac setup right now. So Brian, we'll have to kind of keep everybody posted on just in the months to come how we're using it, if we're running any kind of challenges or questions or issues to make people aware of, and also kind of where our Mac situation fits in the overall Apple Mac strategy for laptops right now anyway. But as always, Brian, we'd love to hear from people that maybe are looking to buy a new Mac laptop, or maybe they have got one and they've got their own experiences or thoughts about them. How can they go about doing that?
Yeah, send us an email at info@themesh.tv. That's info@themesh.tv. And as Alan said, we'd love to hear. We're viewing it from our perspective, but I would love to hear maybe someone got that 13-inch MacBook Pro and they tell us exactly why that fits the bill for them, because we're we're getting those questions a lot, and we'd love to have some more information and use cases to be able to share. You can also go to our website at www.brothers-in-tech. That's brothers-in-tech.com, and look at previous episodes, and hopefully get some new information we can start to share with you. Some of those comments that come through, we can eventually start to pass those along a little bit. So reach out, let us know, and tell us what use cases you have.
Brian, I'm not going to close out the show with a secret word.
I mean, what's their use, right? There's no way they're listening.
It's kind of depressing. For those of you that haven't been listening to the show for the last several weeks, I've been on a journey. My own personal goal is to have one of my immediate family members, meaning that would be my spouse or any of my 3 boys, to listen to the show, to watch or listen to it in general, which they don't. But if they did happen to watch or listen, to actually make it to the end of the show. And I was throwing out a little code word that they was asking them to relay back to me to let me know that they listened to the end of the show. That would be kind of their way of saying, hey, Dad, I heard the end of the show because you said this word.
Yeah.
So, it's too depressing. I've had all the kids home over the weekend. We had a great fall break with everybody home from school and other places. Not a word was said. So you know what? I'm a little bummed out right now, so I don't want to do this again.
Yeah.
Maybe next week I'll get back into it. But,
okay, so I get it. You sound pretty depressed right now about that. Let me choose one that will make you feel much better. All right.
Okay, that might work.
So when one of your children says to you, "Dad, can I borrow money?"
Mm-hmm.
That you will know that they listened to the end of this episode.
Okay. That'd be great.
And there's a good chance you'll feel much better about life, because I bet one of them's going to ask.
Well, now that I know this, I mean, technically, I got asked that a lot over the last weekend. So but they haven't heard this episode yet.
Well, maybe they were thinking ahead. I don't know, but
so the phrase is, "Dad, can I borrow some?" Or buy? Hold on, let me fix that.
Can I borrow my money?
Can I borrow?
There we go.
Money?
Yep.
Okay, so that is the key word there.
Dad, can I borrow money? Good. And you'll come back and be like, "Oh my God, all of my kids listen to that."
3 of my kids must listen. They love this show.
That's right.
Good.
Okay, I'll call you. I'll call you and say that as well if you want. I'll just, Alan, can I borrow some money? All right, man.
Yeah, so if any of my children come and ask me this, then I'm going to take that as a positive that they listen to this episode all the way to the end.
That'll make you feel better.
All right. Well, good. Well, thanks everybody for listening. And thanks for letting Brian and I just kind of rant on about our own personal setup. We will be back soon with, I don't know when our next Brothers in Tech Suggestions episode is, or we're going to do another Brothers in Tech Productivity, Efficiency.
Ooh, are we going to do a bits, or are we going to do a bite? That's the question. Bits or bites?
We may have another topic altogether.
Yep.
It all depends.
Yep.
We're going to see what we talk about next week, but we will be getting together again next week to talk technology one way or another. So I hope you tune into that. Thanks for watching or listening tonight, and we'll look forward to talking to you guys soon. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
And this is where I play the closing.
Alan, can I borrow money?
Doing the closing. Okay, here we go. See you later.